Speaking of money printing, that seems to be the only answer we have at the moment, right, Jim? How would you say? I mean,
Well, it's not the only answer we have. That's the only answer they have.
True.
If you go to the central banks, that's all they know. They want to keep their jobs, and they think the way to do that is to print money. I happen to think it's going to be a disaster in the end, but that's all they know.
Yeah.
They will borrow. They borrow as much as they can, but they will print as much. It's not the only solution. The other solution is to bite the bullet and admit the mistakes and go through some pain. You know, in the early 20s, we had this problem in America, and in America they raised interest rates. They balanced the budget. Had a terrible 2 or 3 years, but then the 20s were a fantastic economic decade for the United States.
Yeah.
In Scandinavia in the early 90s, they had this problem. They bit the bullet. They had a lot of pain, but Scandinavia's done well in the past 30 years. Japan, on the other hand, in the early 90s, oh no, nobody will fail. Print, print, print. Well, you know, the Japanese have had 3 lost decades because they did the wrong thing. So in my view, if you accept reality, you'll wind up better off.
Yeah. Speaking of what you've just said, do we see a Japanification of the global economy? Population getting older, more debt is being accumulated. Maybe also a question to the both of you. Would that be like the plan we kind of face in the future if interest rates stay so low that we globally have this issue?
Well, the Japanese do have a declining population, and the population's been declining for 11 years now. So most countries do not have declining populations yet. They will, but except maybe a couple of the European countries. So the Japanese have serious problems facing. The debt goes higher every day, and the population goes down every day. Who's going to pay the debt? Not me, not Florian. I don't know who's going to pay the debt. No, the Japanese are setting themselves up for a huge problem down the road. Now, will other countries have that problem? I don't know. Taiwan, Singapore, there are countries that have low birth rates, but nothing like Japan. Yet.
Would you see, Florian, that this is becoming potentially an issue?
I would agree. You do need negative demographics to support the argument of a Japanification. And I think Europe may have issues, depending how Europe continues to respond to the burning questions at the moment: digitalization, less bureaucracy, and generally the future of globalization. If Europe is becoming a driving force in all these items, they don't necessarily have to go the way of Japan, but I'm not a big fan of the bureaucracy in Brussels. Just looking at the vaccination campaign, how that was run against the wall.
Before we continue, help us by smashing that YouTube like button and subscribe now to this channel. This shows the algorithm that you value the information, and it helps us spread this message. Sharing is caring. Please like and subscribe now. Thank you. And now, let's continue.
I'm skeptical, although I like the idea of Europe, but I'm skeptical about that. With regards to other areas, the United States have an increasing population, and so do most of the emerging markets. I do not see that risk immediate. What I see is a risk of increased debt and not manageable debt, and the fact that economics are going out now trying to coin new textbooks like the new monetary policy. To me, who has received a kind of old school education, it's mind-boggling. Because it effectively means we can talk inflation away, we can ignore inflation, it's all about employment, and I think that's very dangerous. And now justifying low interest rates, ultra low interest rates, with the argument, if we increase interest rates, we run into a catastrophe and a lot of the institutions will break down. So we keep interest low, but that again encourages governments, and not just corporates, the biggest culprits really are the governments in the developed world, to increase debt. That is a problem. And I think the problem is even more exacerbated in the democratic countries, where people seek re-election and want to hand out goodies to people, especially now using the pandemic as an excuse. I think in the long run we do not just see a danger of of debt spiraling out of control, potentially inflation, and my ancestors in Germany, they knew particularly well what that meant. But we also see a danger to the democratic institutions, I believe. So I agree with Jim. I think it's very unclear where all that leads into, but it is a vicious cycle and it is reckless.
And one difference in Europe and Japan is Europe has immigration. Whether they like it or not, they have immigration. The Japanese have no immigration. They don't like foreigners. And I think this year they said we're going to take 75,000 immigrants per year. Well, I mean, that's a huge change, but 75,000 people does not solve the problems in a country with 125 million people.